Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a review of the Canon RF 45mm f1.2 STM lens. Yes, I did say 45 1.2. This is the first non-L Canon 1.2 lens. Canon's L lineup of lenses all have the red ring around it, and those are the best of the best with honors, sir. Best glass, best coating, best made. This doesn't exactly have that, but this is a super inexpensive lens. When I was first told that they had a 45 1.2 coming out, I was like, puh, how much is that gonna cost? Why do you need a 45 when you already have a 51.2? And then they said the price, $469. And I went, oh, okay, well that kind of makes sense. A super inexpensive 45 1.2? That's insane, because before this, the cheapest, widest aperture that you could get was something called the 50 1.8, which they generally called the Plastic Fantastic. But this is a $469 lens, so keep that in mind throughout this review. So I shot the shit out of this lens. I used it in low light situations like doing portraits with street lights of my buddy who's a bouncer at a local bar. Then I went into the bar where it's super low light situation and used the 1.2 to try and photograph the bartenders. But the next day I went out to a block party, which is beautiful lighting, which is just showing you what you can do still shooting at 1.2 outdoors. And finally, I wrapped it up with photographing a local chef from a restaurant in Fishtown called Ama. So yeah, I did a lot of testing and shooting in the real world with this lens right here. Let's talk about how this lens feels and how it's constructed. It is not the best feeling lens in the world, but it also doesn't feel like the old 50 1.8 Plastic Fantastic, which when you shook it really sounded like it was going to fall apart. This does have a metal mount, but we realized that the 50 1.8 modern Plastic Fantastic RF also has a metal mount. Now these are made in Malaysia. They're not made in Japan like the highest end of the highest end RF lenses. But again, $469. So yeah, it's not very heavy, coming in at 12.2 ounces or 346 grams. In terms of filter thread, you have a 67mm filter thread, and missing from this lens, because it doesn't come with it, is a lens hood. And I highly recommend you don't buy the lens hood because that's like 20% of the cost. It's a $60 lens hood. I am a big fan of using lens hoods for everything, but for a $469 lens, I do not suggest you spend an extra $60 to buy that lens hood. So 67mm filter thread, which is the same as Canon's VCM line of lenses. In terms of buttons, you have exactly 0 buttons on this lens. You do have an autofocus to manual switch, but you also have a custom control ring that you could set right here. That is about it for the lens. Now you don't have any IS. It's not image stabilized. For those people who are using a crop sensor camera that might not have image stabilization, or an R8 which doesn't have image stabilization, just know when you're shooting video, it's gonna be a little more bouncy, or in very low light situations, you might get some motion blur from your hand shaking if you can't stabilize it because you have no IBIS in the body or IS in the lens. When it comes to autofocus, you have what's called gear type STM. It is not the fastest focusing lens by any stretch of the imagination. You are going to hear this focusing. It makes noise and goes in and out and either way, and that's what you're going to deal with. Now, it's not super fast, but it definitely was accurate, and I shot this lens basically full wide open at 1.2 throughout the entire shoot because I want to see what it's capable of doing at 1.2. So I had a kid at the block party run directly towards me at 1.2 to see how many shots that it hit. Now I shot 38 photos in a row, and 5 of them, the ones that are black and white, are the ones that weren't sharp or were completely out. So you can see that in this situation, it did a very nice job of tracking the subject towards me and keeping them in focus for more than were out of focus. But look, it's not going to be perfect in every situation. Even in situations where I didn't have subjects moving, there were times where I was like, come on, focus, get to where you need it to be. But remember, $469. That is very inexpensive, and I got more good shots than bad shots by a long stretch. And I got a lot of good shots with this lens. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you our custom Lightroom presets from Pack 4 in action on this photo right here, starting with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn. We've got C41 for all those people who want to get that filmic look. We have Copper Tone, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, and Wet Hot American Summer. But my all-time favorite from Pack 1 with one click is Skittles, and it makes things go boom. But check this out. All new and exclusive to Pack 4 are 4 custom adaptive Lightroom presets called Face Enhance, Full Body Enhance, Eyes Only Enhance, and Background Blur. So look, if you're new to RAW editing or you want to speed up your RAW workflow and give yourself a great starting point, whether you're on the computer or on the go in Lightroom Mobile, because yeah, our presets work really well on JPEGs and RAWs when you're on the go, we created 14 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at froknosphoto.com/Pack 4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or you can get the Grand Slam bundle that includes Pack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and of course Skittles, and save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Let's jump into a few more pictures. Now, one of the things you might find with a non-L lens from Canon is that you might get a lot more purple fringing and green fringing around the edges of images. Now, for example, this picture of my tripod setup, when you zoom into the middle of it and you see that metal and it has a big purple fringe around it, that's what we're talking about, purple fringing. We have other examples of purple and green fringing that I captured here, but remember, $469. It's something that I notice that a lot of people are not going to notice. We're talking everyday people aren't going to look at it and be like, what is all of that fringing around there? That is something that shows up in less expensive lenses. Remember, $469, not $2,600 like a 51.2. But I just want to point out the pros and the cons through this so you are prepared for them when you see them. Now, the reason you see certain issues show up with an inexpensive lens like this is because of the coatings and type of glass that is being used. The L lenses have the top of the line glass. The VCM lenses have very good top of the line glass. So that stuff is corrected for, but you're paying for it. Now let's look at this outside portrait using just street lights that I had of my buddy Gump. Yeah, his name's Gump. What's it to you? I don't see any fringing around the edges of this image, but it is at night. It is on the street. But because I was able to shoot at 1.2, I could keep that ISO down a little bit more. And as we zoom in on the eye, he is nice and sharp at 1.2 right on his eye. But something else you might notice in the background, and this is something the everyday person isn't going to notice, but how is the bokeh? Well, when we look at the background, we see what's called cat's eye, not a perfectly round, beautiful bokeh, and that comes into play even more when we look at this photo of these flowers. That right there is what they talk about when they say cat's eye. 99.999% of the world don't really care what the bokeh looks like in the background. But another example is this. I think this is a very nice portrait out at the block party, but when you look and zoom in on the background, you can see that the leaves don't look super soft and buttery like you would see if you used a 51.2. But again, just showing you the differences between $469 and something that's going to be $2,600. But that's not saying that all the background blur isn't going to be nice with this lens, because we have this portrait of my friend Kevlar looking really good right here. He's single, ladies. Leave some comments down below. But you got Kevlar here, and you look at the background, you're like, that looks buttery. That looks smooth. And yeah, I'm close focusing here, but it doesn't show you those imperfections. Speaking of close focusing, the closest you can get to and still get focus is 1.5 feet or 45 centimeters. In terms of bokeh blades, we're looking at 9 aperture blades in this lens. Generally speaking, the less expensive lenses have roughly 7. So when we talk about that smooth bokeh in the background, you can see that in some cases we get it, and in other cases it looks not as soft and buttery. Like this dog right here on the street, the background looks perfectly smooth and buttery. So you can see in some images it's going to be very nice, and in other images it might just look choppy. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I use for my personal website at jaredpolin.com because it's simple, easy, and affordable, and I don't need to know any coding. To get a 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FronosPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FronosPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the review. There's a few reasons you want to have a 1.2. One, it's going to separate your subject from the background extremely well. And two, in lower light situations, it allows you to open up the aperture to let more light in, which in turn keeps your ISO lower. For example, photographing inside of the bar called Next of Kin in Fishtown, it is really terrible lighting, but it's a bar. It's not meant to have great lighting because you don't want to see that person you're sitting next to in the light because you just don't want to. For example, the first photo was taken at 1/200th of a second at 1.2 at 6400 ISO. Now, most cameras can handle 6400 ISO without a problem here. But if I was to have a 2.8 lens in this situation at the same shutter speed of 1/200th of a second, I'm going to be around 20,000 ISO, and most cameras are going to look like Swiss cheese right there. To be able to have a $469 1.2 lens is mind-blowing because 20 years ago, the fastest lens that I personally had was a 50mm 1.4 Nikon ED lens, and that cost me around 400 and some bucks used 20 years ago. So it's pretty insane that they hit 469 and you get 1.2 to gather all of that extra light to keep your images nice and clean. One of the favorite shoots I did with this lens was going to a restaurant called Ama and getting access to the chef as well as the kitchen. They let me do whatever I wanted to do. Now, I didn't tell them that I was using a super inexpensive lens. I was just telling them I just need to get some photos because I'm testing something out. This was a great opportunity to get some portraits, just like this photo right here. I had the chef lean on the counter. I had the nice background right there. You could see that the bokeh looks nice and smooth in this one, that you have the nice kitchen in the back of him. Now, he is in focus at 1.2. He's nice and sharp. It is a very nice looking portrait. Now, I'm using a full frame body. For those of you with APS-C Canon bodies, this could be a nice portrait lens for you to grab. Now, it's going to give you the equivalent of roughly 72mm at f2 in terms of background blur. It's still 1.2 in terms of gathering light, but in the equivalent of 35mm, it's roughly f2 when it comes to your background blur. Now, I am really happy with the portraits that I got of this chef. There are some really nice feeling, nice smooth, nice focus. I didn't really feel like I was missing focus in this situation. And what I did is, after doing the shoot, I went back to the studio, edited my favorite images real quick, banged out 3 prints on the Canon Pro 1100 printer, and took it back to the chef. And here is his reaction.
Oh, wow.
And there's 2 more prints under it.
That's so sick. When did you do this?
I just went back and did it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Does that reaction say you used a $469 lens? No, because I got the shots. But funny thing is, this portrait of him has a lot of green fringing when you zoom in on it. It's there. At the end of the day, it's a $469 lens. It's not going to be perfect, but when you get a subject or a client that sits there and says, wow, these are amazing, That's all that matters. Look, if you want the best of the best with Honor Sir, you can certainly go pick that up. You've got a 51.2, and that is going to be $2,600. If you don't want to spend that, there is a 51.4 VCM, and that's going to run you $1,549. And if you really want to go cheapo, you can go cheapo and get a 51.8 RF, which is $239. You have all of the options to decide for yourself, but for $469, this might be, in my opinion, the new Plastic Fantastic, the new go-to lens on the cheap that is going to give you results that you would have otherwise not been able to get at all. Let me jump in here real quick and say, do you struggle in low light situations and want to get sharp images like these? If you said yes, look for this orange box over on phronosphoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm gonna send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. Now, back to the video. There are two more tests that are super important. We've got the sniff test and the wind tunnel test. Let's see if it passes the wind test. I'm surprised. It passed the wind tunnel test. And now, the sniff test. Oh, it smells like aguachile. That's what I had for dinner after I did the photo shoot there. It was super good, so it passes the sniff test. So what started off with a lens that I was like, why is this thing going to exist, ended with me going, $469, 45 1.2. It's not the most perfect thing in the world, but the proof is in the pudding. The photographs look really good. I'm very happy with the results that I got, keeping in consideration that it is a $469 lens. What do you guys think about this lens? Is this something you're gonna pick up? Let me know down below. Thank you very much for watching. Jared, PolinPhonosPhoto.com. See ya.